Everyone thinks they know who Pigpen was. The biker, the pirate, the hard-drinking bluesman who burned out at 27. Some of that's true. Ron McKernan did drink. He did look like he'd just stepped off a Hells Angels chopper. And he did die young, alone in his Corte, Madera apartment on March 8, 1973. But here's the thing about myths. They work because they're simple. Ron McKernan, founding member of the Grateful Dead, was anything but simple. Let's talk about the actual guy, not the poster, not the legend. The guy who covered people with blankets at acid tests. The guy who told The Hobbit to a teenager in a station wagon. The guy Jerry Garcia called our anchor when everyone else was seeing snakes. The loudest man on stage was often the quietest, gentlest person in the room. Ron McKernan was born September 8, 1945 in San Bruno, California. His father, Phil, was an R&B disc jockey who went by Cool Breeze on KRE in the 50s. So Pigpen, Ron back then, grew up breathing the real thing. Lightnin' Hopkins, Howlin' Wolf, Jimmy Reed. When Jerry Garcia met him in 1961, before the Grateful Dead existed, before they were even called the Warlocks, Pigpen was already hanging around East Palo Alto, a neighborhood where a white teenager stood out, and the black community there loved him. Not tolerated him, loved him. Garcia said it himself. He wasn't like a white boy trying to be black, and he was pretty good, too. But the guy who would become the Grateful Dead's blues-belting frontman, he didn't want to be on stage at all. He was very shy, Owsley remembered, and he had to drink a lot just to get up on the stage. Wait, what? The guy famous for 20-minute improvisational raps on Love Light and Easy Wind, telling dirty jokes and playing matchmaker with audience members? That guy had stage fright? Yeah, that guy. Garcia was even more direct. We had to browbeat him into being a performer. Performing meant nothing to him. It wasn't what he liked. So what did he like? Sitting in his room in his underpants with a bottle of wine under the bed, playing Lightnin' Hopkins for his friends. Garcia spent countless hours there learning blues, while Pigpen's mom would check in every 5 hours to see if he was still alive. When he wasn't playing music, he was quoting Lord Buckley routines verbatim, making up weirdly imaginative stories, reading beat writers. As Laird Grant put it, he had no color, meaning Pigpen existed in some space beyond the racial categories everyone else was obsessed with. About that nickname, one night at the Boar's Head at the Jewish Community Center in Palo Alto, everyone's standing around after a show deciding where to party, and Ron McKernan makes some remark. Sherry Huddleston turns around and says, "Oh, Pigpen," you know, like the character from Peanuts, the messy kid with the cloud of dirt. The name stuck. Pete Albin said, "That'd be a great name for a performer, man, like Blind Lemon Jefferson." Ron became Pigpen forever. But the persona that name conjured, the outlaw, the biker, the blues shouter, was performance. Tom Constanten, who played keyboards with the Dead, put it perfectly. He looked like a pirate, but he was one of the sweetest gentlemen I've ever encountered. Sue Swanson, who knew him from the early days, all he did was embarrass me, meaning his Hell's Angels look, but he was a very soft, sweet, and gentle guy. There's your contradiction. On stage, Pigpen was larger than life. Off stage, he was shy, gentle, almost fragile. That gap between public and private, that's where the real story lives. Let's talk about the acid tests, because this is where Pigpen's actual role becomes clear. The acid tests, Ken Kesey's LSD-fueled multimedia freakouts in 1965 and 66, were chaos. Intentional chaos. Everyone was tripping, the band, the pranksters, the audience. Everyone except one person, Pigpen. Pigpen didn't take acid, didn't take psychedelics at all. His thing was booze, which in the psychedelic community made him kind of an outsider. Mountain Girl remembered being confused by it. None of us drank. Are you kidding? It was totally the antithesis to what we were doing. These events, which Tom Wolfe documented in the electric Kool-Aid acid test, were the breeding ground for the San Francisco sound. And in that context, Pigpen's sobriety became crucial. When everyone else was 12 hours deep into an LSD trip, when Jerry's guitar neck was turning into a snake, when reality itself was doing backflips, Pigpen was straight. Or at least drunk straight, which in that context might as well have been sober. Rock Scully put it this way: when the band was going way, way out in Dark Star, they knew they could listen to Pig and have some sense of where they were. You knew he wasn't seeing snakes. Garcia: he was our anchor. We'd be out of our minds, just going insane, and we'd be tethered to Pigpen. You could rely on Pigpen for a reality check. Hey man, is it too weird or what? He'd say, no man, it's cool. Then Garcia said this: Pigpen was like a warm fire, a cozy fire. Hell's Angels would sit around his room fucked up on acid, and Pigpen would be taking care of them. Taking care of them, not partying with them, taking care of them. That's not the biker pirate myth. That's a caretaker, someone who opted out of the collective hallucination specifically so he could keep everyone else safe. People who knew Pigpen remember him covering people with blankets when they were too high to function, checking on friends, making sure the vulnerable were okay. He played anchor not because he couldn't hang, but because someone had to. When you watch footage of early Dead shows and see Pigpen pounding congas while the band goes 20 minutes deep into Dark Star, that's not a guy who's musically limited hanging on for dear life. That's a guy providing the pulse, the groove, the thing everyone can return to when they've been out past Pluto. By 1967, the Dead had moved into their legendary communal house at 710 Ashbury Street, right in the heart of Haight-Ashbury during the Summer of Love. Pigpen lived there with the rest of the band, but even in that psychedelic commune, he remained the stable center, the guy who answered the door when the cops came looking. About that stage persona, yeah, Pigpen did do those improvisational raps during Love Light, Good Lovin', and Alligator. He did tell dirty jokes. He did play matchmaker with audience members, literally pointing at people in the crowd and saying, "You two should get together." Some people today hear about that and think, gross, misogynistic, problematic. Except the people who are actually there, they tell a different story. Blair Jackson, who saw Pigpen perform multiple times, described his crowd work as hilarious, warm, about connection and love, not conquest. Pigpen wasn't some creep hitting on women from the stage. He was creating a vibe, a party, a communal experience. Those raps were rooted in blues tradition, call and response, audience participation. The whole point was to break down the barrier between performer and audience. That's not a guy objectifying women. That's a guy playing the dozens, working the crowd, doing what blues musicians had been doing for decades. But the myth doesn't care about context. Meanwhile, the real Pigpen? In 1966, he met Veronica Barnard. Everyone called her V, at the Blue Unicorn Coffee House on Haight Street. She was a traditionally raised young black woman who'd left her strict Seventh-day Adventist family in Vallejo to check out the San Francisco scene. Pigpen invited her to a party at Owsley, and that was that. When she overheard him say, "My old lady's moving in," she knew she wasn't going anywhere. Their life together was quiet, homebound. Pigpen in his little red chair receiving guests. Janis Joplin, Elvin Bishop, Vince Guaraldi, John Lee Hooker, late-night runs to Leonard's Hickory Pit Barbecue on Fillmore, daily bottle from the A1 Deli on Haight, but mostly just staying home. Not exactly rock star behavior. About Janis, because yeah, Pigpen and Janis Joplin had a thing in 1966. Before Big Brother and the holding company made her famous, before she became the queen of psychedelic blues, she was just another singer on the scene. They'd sit up late at 710 Ashbury, drinking and singing blues together, two souls who understood that raw emotional power of the music. Bob Weir later described their relationship as intense, based on music and drinking in equal measure. Janis saw in Pigpen what few others did, a genuine blues singer, not someone playing at it. But it was V who stayed, V who lived with him for 6 years, V who knew him as something other than the biker pirate. Now let's talk about what actually happened to Pigpen musically. The narrative you usually hear is, the Dead got psychedelic and experimental. Pigpen couldn't keep up. He became irrelevant. The end. Not quite right. Here's what's true. By late 1968, as the Dead were recording Anthem of the Sun and Oxo Moxoa, Pigpen's limited keyboard skills became a problem. He didn't practice. He couldn't or wouldn't learn the increasingly complex arrangements. There was talk, briefly, of replacing him. And he wasn't on Oxo Moxoa at all, though his name still appeared on the album. But here's what's also true. They never kicked him out. The firing, as Garcia put it, didn't stick, because even when Pigpen wasn't contributing much technically, his presence mattered. Phil Lesh said it directly. It was okay for Pigpen to lay out. We kept wanting Pigpen to be there because he was one of us. He really was. Garcia, who could be brutally honest about musical limitations, said this: Pigpen is what made the band work. He was the guy who really sold the band, not me or Weir. Think about that. Jerry Garcia saying Pigpen made the band work. Because Pigpen brought something Garcia couldn't manufacture: soul, authenticity, the ability to connect with an audience on a gut level. When Pigpen sang Hard to Handle or Love Light, people believed him. And when he pounded congas during Dark Star, keeping time while everyone else explored atonal space, he was doing exactly what he'd always done, being the anchor. But the drinking caught up with him. By September 1971, Pigpen was hospitalized with a perforated ulcer and hepatitis. Garcia and the whole band lined up to give blood. He'd lost an enormous amount of weight. The biker pirate was gone, replaced by a small, gentle bluesman barely holding on. He stopped drinking completely, started eating better. Everyone thought he'd recover. In December 1971, he came back to tour. Pale, thin, fragile. He couldn't do the big vocal workouts like Good Lovin' anymore, but he was there, adding organ and percussion, singing his shorter tunes. Europe 72 was hard on him, really hard. He stayed sober the whole tour, which, if you know anything about Europe and alcohol, is no easy feat, but he was visibly struggling. Donna Godshow remembered his vocals were still spot on despite illness, but you could see it wearing on him. June 17, 1972, Hollywood Bowl. Pigpen's last time with the Grateful Dead. He showed up, played a little, sang one song, Rocking Pneumonia. That was it. After that, he went home to Corte, Madera, alone. In November 1972, Pigpen sent V away. I don't want you around when I die, he told her. He was 27 years old. The last months, he was working on songs. Alan Trist from management remembered going to Pigpen's house, hearing tapes of unfinished work. His way of projecting the blues through his singing was so soulful and authentic, Trist said. Rock Scully clarified, I don't think it was really going to be a solo album. He wanted 3 songs on a Dead album. He wanted to be a significant part of a Dead album again. A couple of them were beautiful. Here are some lyrics from one of those songs. Seems like there's no tomorrow. Seems like all my yesterdays were filled with pain. There's nothing but darkness tomorrow. On March 8, 1973, Pigpen's landlady called the Dead office. She hadn't seen him around lately. Dave Parker went over, looked through the window. Pigpen was on the floor, internal bleeding from the esophageal vein. Same thing that killed Jack Kerouac. Result of prolonged drinking. He was alone when it happened. Rock Scully. For Pigpen to die alone, that was one we really beat ourselves up about for a long time. 2 days later, they threw a wake at Bob Weir's house in Mill Valley. 500 people showed up. It was raining. Inside, informal wake riot. Outside, an orgy on the hillside. Hunter said, if there's one thing I learned from Pigpen, I think I'm going to get drunk and have a real good time. And they did. John McIntyre, who chose the alcohol for the wake. What are you going to do, man? A favorite thing in Pig's life was drinking. It was wonderful. It was a great party because it was loose and desperate, and it was full of love. The formal Catholic funeral was more subdued. Pigpen laid out in an open coffin, wearing his leather jacket and cowboy shirt, his hat on the pillow. Garcia called it a bummer. They had an Irish Catholic priest to say kind words, but it was for the straights. 2 days after the funeral, the Dead went on tour, because what else do you do? Bob Weir. We've been getting used to it all along, so it wasn't a sudden change when he died. But Garcia was more honest. Still, after he died, you'd go out there and it'd be like, "Where's Pig?" And we missed all those songs. It was like operating with a broken leg. Here's what we lose when we reduce Pigpen to the myth. We lose the guy who was everyone's reality check when reality itself was dissolving. We lose the gentle soul who covered Hell's Angels with blankets. We lose the shy bluesman who had to drink to overcome stage fright. We lose the partner who sent away the woman he loved because he didn't want her to watch him die. We lose the sweetness Tom Constanten remembered, the warmth Garcia described, the anchor Rock Scully relied on. Garcia said something in 1988 that I keep coming back to. It's hard to say what it was about him that people really loved, but they loved him a lot. I know I loved him a lot, and I couldn't begin to tell you why. He was a lovable person. Then, really, it hasn't felt right since Pigpen's been gone. But on the other hand, he's always been around a little too. He hasn't been entirely gone. That's not Garcia being mystical. That's Garcia being truthful, because Pigpen's presence, that anchor, that gravity, was woven into what the Grateful Dead were, not just musically, but spiritually. When Pigpen died, they lost more than their blues singer. They lost the guy who kept them tethered when they were out past the edge. They lost the gentle soul behind the pirate costume. They lost proof that you could be both, wild and kind, loud and shy, a frontman and a homebody. Everyone thinks they know who Pigpen was. The myth's been running for 50 years. But the real Ron McKernan, he was their anchor. And that meant more than anyone knew until he was gone.